wanted just to get us introduced, since this is going to be a similar process to what happened in the downtown visioning process. Should be something familiar for you. My Mayor Rob Green, we have Mary Madden and Jeff Farrell with us again. They participated or led our sessions the last time around for the downtown visioning. This is an incredibly important process for the city because what we're doing now is going through our zoning, which was last updated in 1970. Everything that we've done since then has been basically an add-on or a Band-Aid sometimes to keep the city moving. So this is basically a refresh of that zoning, those zoning ordinances, to try to build the community that we want to have for the next 50 years. So your participation is vital for that. There's going to be plenty of additional opportunity. I know for the folks at home, since you can't be here tonight, there is going to be plenty of additional time to discuss. But this session gives the consultants an excellent opportunity to see generally what kind of a canvas they're working with when it comes to College Hill and how do we want to paint it. So I'll turn it over to our consultants tonight, and thank you so much for coming.
Hopefully I'm getting hooked up again. So, Mike, okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Mary Madden, and I'm an urban planner designer with Farrell Madden. We've been in town here this week since Sunday night, doing a little follow-up work on downtown, and then starting to get to know quite a bit about College Hill. I appreciate those of you who participated in the downtown effort, that you're willing to come and engage with us a little bit further for the College Hill area. We do want to acknowledge, we know if you saw the map outside, the project is called College Hill. If you looked at the study area map, you probably thought this is a much larger area than College Hill. We do know that, we do understand that. But we wanted to have some kind of name recognition, and it's important for as the mayor highlighted, in looking at the zoning, it was really important to sort of look at the area between the university all the way up to the area that we focused on for downtown. So that's why it's probably a little bit of a larger area than you might have anticipated. So we're going to do a few different things. We're going to have some quick responses we're going to ask you for. We're going to do a presentation that's a little bit of food for thought, and then we're going to migrate back out into the lobby area, and we will have some refreshments available, and we're going to do a much more interactive activity looking at the map of the area and getting a lot more information from you all about what you think is happening in the area today. Our team, as the mayor mentioned, as a group of consultants, Jeff and I with Farrell Madden, Keith Covington is here on my left, who's with Common Ground, based in Franklin, Tennessee, who does urban design work with us. The other members of the team, we have a market economic analyst, we have a land use zoning attorney who's on the team, we have a transportation engineer, and Urban Advantage, those of you who were involved in downtown, is a gentleman named Steve Price, who did the computer visualization. So he will be involved with us here for College Hill as well, sort of doing what if before and after scenarios. But last but not least, this project is not about us. You all, your friends and neighbors, your colleagues are fundamental to the project. It doesn't matter what we imagine for College Hill, we will be gone. We know that, we understand that. So it's really important that this is your vision, your plan. It's the place where you want to live and work for the years going forward. Your knowledge and experience is invaluable to us because you live here every day. You know what was here 10 years ago, you know what you want to see in the future. The very first interactive thing, we have folks in the front and back who are going to hand out some slips and some pencils. This is just a quick response. We're going to ask you what you think today about the neighborhoods around the College Hill Center area, the business area. One word, quick, what do you think about it now? What would you like it to be in the future? And then a second question is that area that you probably think of as College Hill, the center, the business center, what do you think about it today? And what would you like it to be in the future? This just gives us a really good sense about local perceptions, which helps us sort of get a sense of what the community thinks about the area. Give you a couple of minutes there to do that. Did everybody get a slip and a pencil? We have plenty if anybody didn't get one. And those of you watching from home, we do have a project website, and we will make it available if you want to do this online, that you can also give us a one-word response. It's not available tonight, but we'll have it up in the next day or two that you can give us your thoughts about these questions. So I'm looking like about half of you, 3/4 look like you're sort of through writing. If you're done, if you want to pass them back out, if you're still working, we can grab them at the end. So those of you who were involved in downtown, if you see this yellow highlighted area, that's the area that we focused in for the downtown vision plan, and we're working on the zoning code update. And so if you see the sort of greenish area there on the bottom left, that's where we're moving in to focus on the larger College Hill study area. So this effort is, we're doing the kickoff now. It's our fact-finding mission where we get to meet people, talk to people. We've done a walking tour, despite what for us was cold, but we know you are having a sort of a warm spell this week, and we appreciated your doing that for us. We're going to move forward on the vision plan. We will be back later in the spring to do much more intensive vision plan looking to the future, and then we will follow up with the zoning code. So here, if you didn't take a look at the map outside, if you can see the yellow outline, that's the full study area. And I do want to acknowledge for our folks from the university, we do know there's a few pieces of property in here that are officially university property, so we won't be doing any zoning updates for those, but geographically, the city felt it was really important to sort of include this neighborhood to the southwest because it's sort of an isolated area and is important in the larger university area. So tonight we're starting with the kickoff. As I said, we're going to have a presentation and give you some food for thought. We will move into a mapping exercise using dots. We like dots. Thinking about areas that you like and don't like in the study area. So you can give us your feedback. You may recognize some of your friends and neighbors. We use this exercise for the downtown area. It gave us a lot of insights. And yes, some people's favorite place can be somebody else's least favorite place. Sometimes the red and the green dots are on top of each other. We understand that, but that helps us gain a more understanding of the neighborhood. Many of you, I think, already did the visual preference, taking a quick look at images of which things you liked or didn't like or thought could be appropriate for the future of this area. If you didn't have a chance to do it on your way in, you will definitely be able to do it before we head out. Again, this gives us a good sense, just a quick idea for people to say, I like this, it would be good for new development in this area, or to say, I don't like this, or this would be fine somewhere out, in the southern part of the city, but it shouldn't be in the College Hill area. So this helps us get a lot of insights of what this community likes about the built environment or doesn't want to see in the built environment. As I said, we've been out and around walking. We took some pictures. We will do that probably every time that we are back in town to get a sense of what's happening on a weekday around the university, what happens at night, what's going on the weekends. It really helps us get a sense of the 24/7 environment, when it's busy, when it's not busy. Our analysis looks at physically what's there. As I said, we've been looking at the existing zoning. We've been looking at a really old College Hill plan. Let me just quickly ask, how many of you knew there was a 1993 vision plan for College Hill? Okay, so that's helpful. It was interesting for us to take a look at it. That's not going to be limiting, but we've been trying to figure out which things from that plan have been implemented, which things are were recommended 26 years ago and maybe could still make a difference today. But we've been looking at that. Some of that was absorbed into your larger citywide comprehensive plan in 2012. As I said, we have a market economic person on our team who will help us. As much as we like to envision great things, they will help remind us, well, who's going to pay for that? How does it get built? Is there a market for that today? And we know you've just gone through the parking study. We have been reviewing, learning, absorbing that, and trying to get a sense of the transportation around the area. We've heard a little bit of that. We met with students last night who gave us their perspective on how they get around in this area. So all of these pieces come together. This plan needs to be very holistic, and that's what we're going to be working towards. We will be back in the spring and do a full-blown, what we call the visioning design charrette, and that's going to be very interactive, very hands-on. We will literally bring people around tables to tell us what they would like to see, but rather than just having people say, oh, I wish that we could have a new community swimming pool, we look for those ideas, but we also have people literally using the map of the area. So if somebody says, I want a new community swimming pool, or I think that there should be a new neighborhood library, we have to look at the facts on the ground. Where would it be? Who owns that property? Does it make sense? How would people get there? I'm not saying that anybody has advocated for a swimming pool or library. Those are just examples. But so we'd like to go beyond the ideas and say, okay, where could it actually fit in this community? In the process of the visioning and people giving us their ideas, we have the citizens, participants, the residents talk to each other. We don't try to interpret what they said. They literally get up and say, our table, we had these ideas, here's our 3 big ideas, and we have everybody communicating. Typically during that process, if we have 6 tables, 8 tables, 15 tables, as you progress through the tables, it's incredible how much similarity you start hearing. You start realizing a lot of people have a lot of common ideas, like they want to be able to walk around their neighborhood to get places, or they want to be able to bike, or that they wish there were different housing options, or they want certain areas to be preserved and maintained. But all of that's going to feed into our overall visioning work. While we are here, we will have what we call an open design studio, and I don't see Stephanie, I believe. We're going to be doing that at the Hearst Art Center, if I'm not mistaken. We will be working on site, and people will be able to come in and see what we're working on, give us additional input, tell us that's not what we said at the hands-on session, you missed the point. In addition, we will do what we call technical meetings. So as we start testing ideas, we will circle back to the city planning staff or the public works staff who let us know about floodplains and stormwater, and there's something buildable or not buildable. Our market economics person will come back and circle to landlords and people to say, you know, what kind of rents make sense, what is buildable, achievable, making us stay honest, that we don't just come up with pie-in-the-sky ideas. As I mentioned, we will have folks, Steve Price doing something you might recognize, 4th Street in downtown. He will do very photorealistic visual simulations. Here's what's here now. What potential could we do? What might happen with revitalization and redevelopment? How might that change? Ultimately, this is the city and the private sector working together. This is not going to be done by the city. It's the city making sure the rules are set, the rules are in place, so that private property owners can build what the city, the community says they want to see, or to make sure the private property owners maintain what fits into the plan. We will do computer simulated images. We will also do hand drawing. So we'll look at some actual properties around the area, whether they're empty parcels or whether there may be a parking lot, or whether it's someone who said, I'm ready to demolish this house that's been chopped up into apartments and is really disrepair, and I would like to sort of explore what kind of things might be able to be redeveloped on that site. So we'll look at a lot of different aspects, show people ideas about how this might work. We call it a work in progress presentation because this is very compact. We do it in about 5 or 6 days. We will immediately present it back to you all so that you can say, yes, you heard us, you're on the right track, or, oh, these 3, you're on the right track, they're good, but this 4th thing you showed us is, you've missed the mark. That is not what we want to see in this neighborhood. But we think it helps people understand beyond just words of, we want mixed use, we want affordable housing, we want, it's really putting the pictures behind those words. In the summer, midsummer, I believe, we will bring a draft vision plan, early summer, back for public review. We did this with the downtown plan. We made edits and revisions, and so that ultimately the Planning Commission and the City Council, if we get it to the point that they say, yes, this is the College Hill plan, it will be adopted. And that will provide us with the foundation to move forward and update the zoning for this area. That starts getting really technical. Most people don't know what the current zoning is. You maybe know what the zoning is for your home, but as far as what's allowed currently on College Hill, or if you want somebody to redevelop and they can't now, maybe it's because of what the zoning currently says, what the limitations are. So we will really then come back and make propose changes for the zoning. That also will go through the public review process, that people will have a chance to comment. It will go through Planning Commission and ultimately go to the City Council for adoption. Big picture, that's sort of the project. I'm going to hand the microphone to Jeff, who's going to talk a little bit more, give you more food for thought about what is urban design, placemaking, et cetera.
Visual things. Actually, she's not going to hand me the mic because I have my own. And Mike tells me that my mic is working. We're going to roll through a series of images talking about big idea. What does it take to make a good place? This is a place for human beings to live, a good city or town. And in our work, there's some just kind of really basic things that are, I think, universal. As long as we're talking about where human beings live, they're pretty universal. First of all, a vital center. This is not Cedar Falls, that's in Kentucky, but Cedar Falls has a vital center. It's a unique, it's understood. Second, real neighborhoods. And you can kind of tell, you can describe where they are, what part of town they're in. It's not just a development, amorphous developments where everything's the same. Neighborhoods. Walkable streets. And we'll talk more about walkability, but this is not just places where you're able to walk, but places where you want to walk, and it rewards that. If they put you on a crane, they could put you on top of a big building and you could walk around on the roof. That doesn't make it walkable. That's obviously a walkable street. And Cedar Falls has a lot of those. By the way, you guys have, this place has great bones. The basic structure is really wonderful. So you're in a good position. And then here's an idea, and this happens everywhere. You don't want to build any more of the kind of auto-oriented strip. All American towns and cities, you have this. It's kind of a natural thing to happen on the edge. In some ways, you could say that there was an idea when these got started that when we build out, we'll change that and make that better too. So if you have that, don't build any new, and where you've got that close to your center, you want to evolve that. And unique community character. Again, this is up on the north side of Lake Superior in the UP, Marquette, Michigan.
South side.
What?
South side of the lake.
It seemed to me like it was really far north. Lake Superior was like 6 feet solid. So anyway, and this was a town. It's got a unique character because because it's so damn cold, and it was an iron ore mining place that built our Army and our Navy for world wars, and they're still doing it. It's got a certain character. Cedar Falls has that too, in spades. And we talk about the natural features. There's kind of a subtext that actually we used to have on the bottom of this slide. Don't kill the goose that laid the golden egg. Part of the thing that makes these great American small towns great is they're a contrast and a complement to the countryside. Cedar Falls is a great place. It wouldn't be such a great place if it were in the middle of unending sprawl, strip mall after strip mall after strip mall. Part of what's great about it is you drive a little bit. In your drive, you have this great environment. The farms, the countryside, and the city are really partners. Now I'm going to shift gears a little bit. We're talking about revising and updating the zoning ordinance. We do it with an emphasis on placemaking. It's not that abstract. It's not abstract categories. That's part of it, but think about the kind of place. This existing area, that's commercial in zoning. That's commercial zoning, the strip mall. Well, the next slide is commercial as well, but it's a lot more. I would say that's not any place, that's someplace. Happens to be State College, where Mary lives, but that's commercial. It's also, there's something other than commercial going on. It's got a lot of the stuff the other has, but it's got a lot more. And a sense of place has a lot to do with the way the buildings are arranged. So we're talking about placemaking. What's the character of the place? And it's not made because it's a commercial zone versus a residential zone. These things have to knit together. And I want to introduce an idea. Conventional zoning, and it's what we've been using on our cities and towns and everything for the last couple of lifetimes, all of my lifetime and maybe a couple before that, really has this, it's very abstract, it's based on uses. We have so many subdivisions of use and density, and that's not enough. I'm going to show you some pictures now of things that in the kind of abstract world of zoning you could say are exactly the same, but because of physical things, they're completely different human environments. Okay, a townhouse or a row house is something like that. Now this is a really mediocre. You can do a lot better than this. That's not a great street. Sidewalk's too narrow, no street trees, all this. But that's a set of, this is a good example. These are townhouses or row houses, and there's a certain zone. I'm going to show you now, and this actually, these two environments are really close to one another. So are these. But in part by the simple fact that they have the car coming in from the front, it's a completely different human environment. And you think about that, but in kind of zoning terms, it's really the same. There's no differentiation. But think about if your daughter or your grandparent had to walk this sidewalk every day. It's a different world. It's also a little bit less safe. I mean, with these garage doors, here's a little curb and the rest is cut. So it's not it's not really a comfortable sidewalk. You look at this, it's like the cars, this is all about cars. There's a little squeeze thing there, as opposed to the other one, which has the parking in the back. So now these are buildings that, and this is not a good, it's a fair comparison, but this is a human dwelling where it's still got the parking, and it's easily in and out and all that stuff, but the front of the building interacts, and becomes a human environment. It's not the use, it's also the form. There's a relationship. And now a little bit, I'm trying not to bite my tongue. I want to talk about parking, which have we heard about parking. And we've had this series of meetings today, plus we've been here before, and we have to be really thick not to realize parking is a really serious issue here. in terms of a lot of conversation about it, people are really focused on it. It is an issue. I'm not going to talk about the parking ratios or anything like that. I'm going to talk about the way we deal with it. Here's an example of a parking structure, and this is the wrong way to do it. I think when you have a parking structure exposed to the street, and this one has no effort to make it pretty, but even where you try and put gigas on the side, when you've got that raw parking on the street, a parking lot does it to a fair extent, a parking structure does it a lot. I'd use this analogy, it sucks the vitality right off the street. And I've been told, and I have some understanding, you see those two guys there, if you're a woman in this environment walking down the street, it's an uncomfortable place, even if you're a guy. Maybe especially if you're a woman, you see these two guys, one of them's me, can't be threatening if I try, but it's not a comfortable place. Now, you've got to have parking. Every place has parking. I want to make a weird analogy. It's like a house having a bathroom. All our houses have bathrooms these days, but if you go over to somebody's house to visit, you've never gone to somebody's house where you open the front door and you have to walk through the bathroom to get into the house. We put the bathroom in its proper place, which is kind of off to the side. Parking shouldn't be, if you have it, shouldn't be exposed, damaging the sidewalk like that. You want to put it behind the building, inside the building. And here's a variation on that. This is a very busy place in Northern Virginia. There's a metro station near it, but this is a parking lot. It's a parking structure. Oh, sorry, I went too far. This is a view at night. It's got a very busy nightlife. It's been kind of a center of this area for a long time. They needed a parking structure. This is, if you're thinking purely in terms of a parking structure, it's not a great parking structure. It's kind of a B minus, because the ground floor has a little bit of parking, but the ground floor sacrifices parking to put shops in because they recognize the importance of keeping that street activated. And I'll tell you, especially at night, hundreds of people on a weeknight walk by it without realizing, I'm by a parking structure. The experience and the life of being in that area is uninterrupted. But the block wasn't big enough. They couldn't completely bury this full parking structure, so it had to come out to the street. Well, they made the compromise, so that's why this is a great example. They made the vertical openings on the top. It's not the big, raw kind of horizontal gash. But if you glance at that, you just know nobody lives up there. So it'd be a better street if those were apartments or offices and people looking out. But they made this smart compromise and they kept this good street. So this is an example of a way you can't be perfect, but you can come pretty close if you're smart about it and you're thinking about what's involved in making the space. What's to save and what's to compromise on. Now I'm going to show you two different places, both of which, and I'm kind of using some zoning language, both of which are mixed use, call them medium density, and that might vary. You might think this is high density. It kind of depends on where you are. But these two places, they're both big transportation corridors, similar density, and actually on both of them, if you continue that way about 5 miles, you'll kind of run into some of the federal buildings in Washington, D.C., like maybe the Lincoln or the Washington Monument. Okay, here's the other one. They're not too far away, and this is a completely different world. The traffic levels on both, not that different. On this one, when it's peak hour, the parking on the side has to go away. And it actually works, but hugely different environments. The difference is not, they're both mixed use, they're both medium density or whatever, transportation corridors, but the arrangement and the mix of uses, the buildings physically are arranged differently. They're making a space, a consistent space. They're good sidewalks. They're trees that help break up the width and make, in the summertime, a ceiling. And I will say I loved, this is Georgian architecture, like kind of original stuff built. Some of it built in the late 18th something, early 19s. That's good, but that's not fundamentally why this is a really different place. That might be a compliment, but it's the big things, how the buildings are arranged, that make it a different environment. Our approach to placemaking and the regulations, the zoning that does that, is form and character first, then use. We're talking about something that's often called form-based coding in large part. And sometimes people say, they've heard it, form-based coding means you don't pay any attention to uses and anything goes. That's not true. If anyone tells you that, you know that person doesn't really know form-based coding. It's based on form, but there's some aspects of use that just common sense would tell you you've still got to deal with. It's all about how the pieces fit together. Talk about connectivity. This is mixed use. There's commercial and there's residential. And at some point, you know, you can climb over that wall and go through, probably through a drainage moat and come over here and do some shopping. That's a problem. You can, at some point, somebody got mad and they made them build a wall and a walkway so they can somehow get around to the back of that. But it's pretty obviously, that's not a good idea to do it. An important part of that is streets and blocks. And guess who has a great street and block system? This is an old plat of Cedar Falls. You might recognize it. You guys you're lucky. It's really hard to create this stuff new if it's gone. Here's I'm going to jump. This is a kind of diagram cartoon about a block and how things can fit together on a block. There's an idea that the red represents, this is a street that has commercial on it, but obviously those buildings, that's the ground floor, but they may have something else up above. The yellow, residential, and if you look at the basic forms, on every side of an alley, there's kind of a different environment, different kinds of buildings. So if I live on that front street, that has one big character. On the same block, I go around the corner, and it's, after I walk maybe 100 feet, it's no longer that red street, that commercial or Main Street environment. It's like it's my street. It's a residential street. And they're actually quite close together. You could have row houses, you know, the other streets back there. There's a little bit different character on the other block over. The idea is that the street is the focus of the space, and if you're going to change zoning, you'll change it. You won't change it in the middle of the street. And look at how on one street, and this is an exaggeration, you can have all these different, on one block rather, you can have all these different characters and ways of living. You can have shop fronts and maybe apartments up above or offices, courtyard apartments. Maybe that on the upper left is a big house, or maybe it's two apartments, regular straight row houses, small, call them bungalows or cottages, all on the same block. And then the thing in the middle, that's like a garage apartment, the granny flat, which, you know, my granny would never live there, but maybe you put your office back there, or you rent it out, or you put your kid back there when they're teenagers and driving you crazy. And then at some place you add the civic building, churches, schools, etc. And in this really small area, you've got all these different aspects of life. Everybody sleeps. This is the zone where they shop. This is where you go to school, government. A healthy town and city has these things really properly knitted together. And a quick point, when you're making those differentiations, make the change in the middle of the block or at the alley. Here's a quick example. Talking about, I can't help but call it a Main Street environment, which is a little clumsy because you have a Main Street, which in some places is Main Street, in some places it's residential, but here's that mixed use apartments or offices above, and then there's a shop where you can buy a Weber grill apparently, and probably a $5 coffee, etc. But what happens when I walk down the side street and go, and we used to build this way all the time, I walk maybe 100 feet, there's a reminder of the front of that building, and look how much the environment changes. And the idea is, by putting it together, you can be, you can be like this far from a so-called commercial zone and your life isn't ruined because it's a bad clash. It's actually, you might want to live in the first or the second house down from this building. You might want to live upstairs. But if you live in the first house down or the second or the third, it's great because I can walk out my front door, take a left or a right, depending, and I have access to all those choices and all that stuff. Or I could walk in the other direction and it's more residential, tree-lined streets. So if you do this right, you have things knitting together. It can be the most positive human environment. And I'll say it again, you've got it. And I apologize I didn't shift that to one of the aerial views of, I'm sorry I blew it, of our study area. Here's a shift, an idea about streets. People talk, should we have a street here? Should we close the street down? Is the street bad or good? But you can't just say street because streets have so many different characters. There's so many different types. There are big residential streets, small residential streets. That's a big city street, small town street, all these different things. A street can be a really quiet place that slows the cars down, favors walkability over cars, or it can be a big street where it carries traffic through the city or to another city. And the walkability of the pedestrians, they're still there, but they don't dominate. There are all these different balances. You have to have them all, and you can still make them great places. And great things happen along these streets. This is the Rappahannock Coffee Shop, not in Iowa, sorry, but these are things that happen. You probably wouldn't have that along a huge street. Here's an example of a street by an apartment building. This is a fairly new building. It's kind of under all the rules and economic problems of new construction. It's not complicated stuff to lay out. It's not really rocket science, but that's a relatively simple building of pretty good density. And, on-street parking, that's a good human environment. It may not be the right character. It doesn't go everywhere, but it's a human environment. Here's an example. That's actually a huge, major street in Washington, D.C. Here's at the other end of the scale, single-family houses with front porches, a different part of the city. There's still some consistencies, but a very different thing. And here's a bad example. This isn't a street. This is a roadway, kind of a highway. Really bad example. It's bad for people. And the people in the cars aren't happy either. You want to avoid that, and luckily you don't have too much of that. But the street itself can be a public space just like a park can. And sometimes it's a matter of it's just a nice place, it's got a fairly wide sidewalk. Sometimes it's a place that has an extra wide sidewalk and it's restaurants, or in this case, half a flower shop, a coffee shop that I've been going to under 3 different names, restaurant down the side, a really human place, but it's an intense, active place. This is the kind of thing that might, obviously up in the neighborhoods of single-family houses, that doesn't belong, but down, say, 23rd and College, you have some things like that, and you can have more and better. And these are people places. And by the way, people places are also good business places, because these people are buying coffee and croissants and whatever. This is a place where the activity reinforces itself. A quick point about street trees. Street trees, if you just plant them well and give them some soil to grow in, they can be the most transformative things. And you've got streets of great street trees. Some need a little bit of help, but just look how much that really sad environment benefits from the trees that someone planted. Obviously, at least 10 years ago, there's that saying, the best time to plant a street tree is 10 years ago or right now. They're very important things in making of the environment. And the idea, they're actually very efficient. They can make a place much better in terms of, it's not that expensive until you start trying to do, high-tech things with paving, et cetera, with not much soil. On the other hand, Trees only do so much. If that's how thank you for giggling. It's like, they can't do everything. It's going to be hard to make a big blank wall be a human place, so there are other things involved. A quick point, public places, in addition to the street, they're all different kinds. There's a park, which you have. There are also pocket parks. This is a park and a fountain, actually, Savannah, Georgia. Here's a little, actually really small kind of a plaza and a development. Well, now it's a place. It was a development 20, 30 years ago in Texas. And they just, if you look on a site plan, it's just the smallest place. But as a pedestrian walking by, that little bump out there, that's a great place for a business, for somebody to come. And this is wintertime, so the trees are a little bare. But that little thing is a good place and adds value to everybody around it. A point about walkability, this is also about how you spend your government dollars, your tax dollars. This is an example of a mismatch. This is a suburban development. This is actually in Chicago, and they shouldn't have tried to build the suburbs in Chicago, but it was early in Chicago's revival. They had this really urban stuff across the street, but this doesn't belong here. If you try and compete with the suburbs, you'll lose, because you're just not the suburbs. But look at this. They spent a lot of money on these. Those are really nice, expensive benches, a fence, the flags, et cetera. But in that environment, it's not really walkable. And you notice something in this kind of environment, even the homeless people avoid this place. You will not have a problem with homeless people. And I don't mean to be cruel, but really, homeless people, even homeless people who don't have that many choices, feel the inhumanity of this place. So this is, I'd say, this is just wasted streetscaping and government money because it's trying to do something in a suburban environment. You can walk down the sidewalk, but the sidewalk's not wide enough. It's clearly a mismatch. Things about walkability, it needs to be easy, efficient, and you can read the rest. And you need to want to be there. And even if you're not shopping, when I walk down a street like this, if I go by a hardware store and you can see in the windows, or a place that has tools, or I don't know, something that I'm interested in, I get captured, and sometimes I go in and I spend money that I shouldn't, that I didn't intend to, but it's an interesting thing. Even if I'm going by a storefront that has something that I'm not at all ever going to buy, for me or anybody I know, it's still interesting. The activity of the storefronts make the place. So people want to walk there, and they also have some place to go. That's very important. A point about speed, if you've got streets that are going to have many pedestrians on them, certainly in neighborhoods, there's this unfunny thing that happens. Above about 55 miles an hour, if you get hit by a car, you got a 50-50 chance of dying. And I think in that 50% where you live, it's not pretty. You're really screwed up. Over that, you're just dead. But if you get hit by a car that's going 20 miles an hour, you're going to have, one heck of a bruise, et cetera. You're probably not going to die. And it's a combination of things. That is just the physics of it. But something else happens when cars, and I have a little sports car, and I like to drive. I enjoy driving, and on curvy roads, I enjoy driving fast. But the reaction time, the distance, if you're going above, the faster you go, the more that when I see something, by the time my foot hits the brake, the travel distance, plus it takes longer for the car to stop, even if you're leaving skid marks, et cetera, it just makes sense when you've got a lot of pedestrians around on a city, inside the city street, to bring the speeds down, make it comfortable for people to walk across the street and alongside the street. A quick point about walkability. Remember when Letterman. That's weird. David Letterman had the show, he'd do the top 10 of whatever, count them down. There may be people in here who are too young to remember David Letterman, but he had a top 10, and this is a play on that. The things that make up walkability: lower traffic speeds, traffic volumes. Street trees, good sidewalks, interconnected streets, which means a street and a block network. They're places to go. On-street parking, parallel parking is like armor. You can have cars going by fast, but if there's a parked car between you and that, you can be very comfortable. Narrow streets slows down the cars, also makes it much easier to get across the streets as a pedestrian. Mixed land uses, because there's more going on. Active building fronts, walking by a blank wall, and we're getting up in importance. And then the idea of small block size. And that's, again, that's something you've got for some big projects. The developers or architects might look at it as these blocks are small, and it makes our life much harder. But as a pedestrian, as livability, these small blocks make your life much better. Sometimes people ask the question, because we're talking, we did this stuff, we used to do this stuff before about the 1950s. We had it, we built it, you're living in it right now, a lot of it. And as there's somehow magically we can't build that stuff anymore, and that's nonsense. Of course you can. That's a new development. Actually, at this point, it's old. It's a 1990s or 80s. This is a newer development, and what I want you to see here, it's not the greatest picture, but this is, see the guys, the little kind of classic single-family house with gingerbread, a guy walking his dog. Well, look back in the picture, and what you see are 20-story buildings, and nobody's even thinking about proposing that for Cedar Falls. I think I can say that certainly for the College Hill study area, but this is an area in Northern Virginia. There's a metro station there, and when they're underground, at some point they decided, I won something. Back in the late 60s and 70s, they had the idea, we're going to not change the zoning here. And they actually do this thing that's a little bit odd where they make a deal, but we're going to potentially increase the zoning within is it a half mile or a quarter mile? I think it's a quarter mile radius, so half mile diameter. Within this area, right around this metro stop, we're going to allow the potential for the density, and the whole neighborhood, the whole place was single-family houses like that, 1 and maybe 2-story. But here we're going to let this be a center. We're going to allow mixed use. We're going to allow this to become a city center. So they would, if you want to build here, give us these things, build this way, and we'll let you go instead of 2-story, single-family, 20-story, mixed-use office, tower, whatever. But this person, by living here, and the transition from that to that is really tight. So that guy who lives in that house, if he turns left, he stays in the world of single-family, small house, kind of Mayberry, if you know what I mean. Or if he goes the other way, he can be in a really intensive urban environment. And the two, he's got his choice. And by the way, in this county, the big stuff has prevented the taxes from being raised on those single-family houses in this county for the last 10 or 20 years. That, in more intense development, pays more taxes. So it's even smart just economically. An example of an old building, mixed use, dry cleaners actually. New building, mixed use, apartments and offices up above, and all sorts of different things going on at the ground floor. So yeah, we can build it, especially if our zoning doesn't prevent it. A lot of places, the old zoning prevented you from doing these things. New development, mixed use, you can't see it, but to the right, there's a high density, about a 6-story condominium building. This is the other side of that development because this is where it transitions across the street from this to the left, single family bungalows and large houses that were there before. So if you look at this house, if you walk up about 60 feet kind of around that tree, there's a portal. You walk through that portal and you're in the middle of that other intense development. You walk right into this. So it's well added, well integrated, well connected. And a point about,
Uh-oh, did you hit a button?
I
I
want to
think
make,
that was the thing that was dinging.
okay. There's an IT guy around here somewhere, but I'm going to keep talking. One thing, and a point of all those examples is, I want to make the point about compact development. If somebody's talking about density increasing, you never do it like spray it across the whole area like water. All of those examples, where density, where there was that intensity, where there was commercial and retail uses, that was small, compact, and grouped development, because those things have a synergy. That allows them to be next to existing single family and complement it and be part of a healthy place. And this is the point at which I'm supposed to hand the microphone over to Mary, but there's nothing she can do with it. Oh, we're almost there.
Nope, we're coming back. We're coming back. Magic touch. Just have a couple of things. We're going to let everybody stand up and talk and grab. So we had the one-word cards. We're going to do another little exercise as we move out, but I'm going to explain it now because when we get in the big room, the acoustics are a little weird, and we will have a microphone, but so everybody kind of listen up. This is where we want to hear back from you. Maybe the food for thought influenced you, maybe it doesn't. We're going to go out into the atrium space, and there are tables around. We want to encourage you to fill up tables first. We think we have plenty, but rather than going to a table by yourself, this really benefits from people working together. Each table has a map of the study area, aerial photo map. We want to hear from you what you currently think about this area, site specifically, using dots. Well, first we're using pins. We want you, there are markers there, we want you to identify sort of where are the connections between the neighborhoods and the College Hill Center business area, and or the connection back towards downtown. So there are markers, I mean literally draw on the maps with the pins. Another question related to those connections, are there places, if you walk or ride your bike, are there certain streets that you ride and walk on? So how do you actually move and make those connections? That should be pretty quick. And at your table, you do not all have to agree. So if you have 5 people at your table, you may have 5 different places that you most commonly walk. That's fine. That gives us a sense of a lot of different routes that people might take. The next thing we're going to ask you, you will have some red and green dots, and don't worry, they are bigger than the ones that you used for the visual preference survey, so hopefully they're easier to handle. We would like you to stick them on the map. Green dots on the places that you like, that are your favorite places. Red dots, that are the places you think are weak. Maybe you think they should go away. Maybe you think they should just not ever be built again. Maybe you just think they're fine, but they're not safe. So it's a subjective exercise, but it gives us a sense of what places people like or don't like. Again, you do not all have to agree. One person's favorite place and favorite bar on College Hill may be the place that somebody else thinks needs to be shut down. That's fine. You can have different opinions. Along the side, there's a list. So in addition, if you just are more comfortable using the dots and that's all, that's great. That still tells us something. If you want to explain why you like or don't like something, just write a number on the dot, and then on the list say number 4 is the OP, and I love it as a place to go eat or whatever. Or this is Searley Park, and I think it's the best thing in the entire study area. This is where we get a sense of what people like and don't like. If you have any other comment that you want to make, feel free to just add it on and say additional thought, additional comments. Again, your table does not have to reach any kind of consensus. This is just giving us some input in a place-specific way so we can understand Are you talking about something way up in the northeast area? Or are you talking about something that's right across the street from the university? This is going to really, really help us get a better understanding of what's going on in the study area. Last but not least, if you did not have a chance to do the visual preference exercise on your way in, we would encourage you to do that before you leave tonight, either right before you move out or just before you head out. If you're doing that, you know, I like this, I don't like this. You do not need to put a sticker on every image. I think most people got that before. We're going to head out for the exercise. I believe there are some coffee and cookies if you need a little pick-me-up, because we talked a lot here. We want to get a good sense. We're going to be floating around, sort of listening, talking, asking questions. But we're not going to try to steer your conversation. This is you guys giving us input. Talk amongst yourselves, agree, disagree, mark up the maps to your heart's content. We will kind of circle back around and have a little bit probably of an open conversation to wrap up. For the evening, we will keep the maps and we will start studying them and figuring out what you told us. And we're going to have one little other piece at the very end.